During my recent review of the Elite Series 2 core, I mentioned that Microsoft increased the warranty from 3 months to a year and supposedly tightened up the quality control by including new internals that are going to make the controller more reliable. Today we're going to look for any visible, tangible, feelable proof that there's different parts or components inside of the new core controller in comparison to an OG Series 2, which dropped in November of 2019. I genuinely hope there is, as this controller is notorious for having terrible quality control. Broken bumpers, stuck face buttons, usually A or B, and stick drift sometimes right out of the box. If you didn't catch my core review, that was actually the first controller I ever experienced out of the box stick drift with, which is insane because statistically, accidentally by now, with the amount of controllers I have personally tested and reviewed, I should have encountered out of the box stick drift by now. A long intro for a teardown or disassembly video, but I want you to have a little context and understand what the hell we're doing here today when we stare at the guts of these two. A quick disclaimer, the disassembly or teardown in today's video will void your warranty because you're taking the sucker apart. Microsoft doesn't want you to do that. There's a 3-month warranty on the existing Series 2, which is absolutely disgusting. That's a very short term for a premium or pro controller. So there's a good chance that you're out of that warranty period anyway, in which case have at it. Now, if you have the Elite 2 core controller, it is virtually impossible you're out of your warranty window because this controller came out about 5 days ago and now carries a 1-year warranty. So only proceed with this teardown or disassembly process if either Microsoft has shafted you on your warranty and you need to make some repairs yourself, or you don't want to wait to get a replacement sent out and you want to tinker and try and repair something yourself, or you want to customize the controller, hydro dip the front shell, change the face buttons, things like that. I'd rate the difficulty of today's project a 4 out of 5. Why so high, Kevin? It's just a disassembly or teardown. This is actually one of the more complex and pain in the ass controllers to disassemble. First of all, this is the only controller I've ever seen that has threaded thumbstick bases instead of just popping on and off. Not a huge deal, but more of a pain in the ass. You'll need a couple unique screwdrivers, which you might not have laying around, a T6 and a T8, which I recommend you pick up because it's very common with controllers, consoles, cell phones, tablets, and other small electronics devices. Now, the biggest pain in the ass is getting this front faceplate off. You will most likely need a heat gun. They're linked in the description below for about 20 bucks. If you can't afford that, steal your sister's hair dryer, put it on its highest setting. You're going to need it to break down the adhesive or glue inside of this faceplate. But the biggest downside is there is virtually no way to disassemble these controllers without in some way, shape, or form damaging your rubberized grips. This one's pretty bad. I had a little slipsy-daisy. This was using plastic tools and a heat gun, being extremely careful, and I still damaged the grips. Granted, it's just cosmetic. You don't feel a difference. There's no bumps or scrapes that you feel on your palm, but if you do damage them enough, you will actually feel that, and that will cut into the comfort of your controller. And if you try and pry the front shell off from the middle, rather than the rubberized grips, you actually face the risk of not only breaking the clips, but actually the front faceplate down the middle itself. So your best way to go is actually just slightly damaging your rubberized grips, which sucks. That, plus you also have a mother and daughter board, which you'll need to juggle and are connected by 2 wires on each side. You also have 2 rumble force motors, which are just dangling, and if they get ripped out, you will need to solder them back into place, unless you don't want vibration, in which case, just rip them out and save some weight and battery life on your controller. So disassembly of a Series 2 or Series 2 core is different than an Elite Series 1, which is more similar to a standard Xbox controller. The first step there being to pop off these side panels and then loosen 2 T8 screws in each hand grip and 1 T8 screw in the battery tray. That then allows you to separate the rear shell and the front faceplate. However, with the Series 2, the front faceplate is actually held on with some pretty intense adhesive. Now, if you're bold and brave, you can use your fingernails to pry this off. I recommend some kind of a plastic pry tool. It looks like a thicker guitar pick, or you can use one of these bad boys. This one is all gnarled to hell because it's already been used for multiple teardowns. If you do take the heat gun route, I recommend keeping it moving constantly because it will melt directly through your plastic and definitely your rubberized grips. Thing gets pretty hot. Well, I mean, I guess that's the whole point. It's a gun that produces heat. Also, unfortunately, this controller did turn on as I did accidentally hit the Xbox home button. Not the end of the world, but you do want to make sure that power is cut off to a controller before you disassemble it, obviously. Since this does use an internal battery, you can't really remove disposables. If your controller accidentally turns on, hold down the Xbox home button for around 15 seconds and that will cut power to the controller. Now, as you can see, there is some very heavy-duty adhesive in there holding this faceplate secured to the controller, and in my opinion, that is the hardest part of the teardown or disassembly of an Elite Series 2. Because of the adhesive they use in the front faceplate, it makes it incredibly hard, almost impossible, to remove the front faceplate without damaging the rubberized grips in some manner. Keep in mind, I have the right tools for the job and I have the steady hands of a surgeon, but I had a little whoops-a-daisy here, which is very common with these rubberized grips. The larger screwdriver is a T8, the smaller one is a T6. We're going to go with the T8 and remove 6 screws, 2 in the bottom, 2 in the middle, this one being covered by a sticker, and 2 in the top. I do also recommend using magnetized tools. If you do not have a magnetized tip screwdriver, a metal block like this is about $5 on Amazon and will magnetize your tools. Very useful working on small electronic devices such as cell phones or controllers. Again, all this is linked in the description below. Now, I do recommend loosening and tightening these screws in a star pattern or a little crisscross applesauce. Evenly distribute pressure amongst your controller. Now, this is a security measure from Microsoft to see if this controller has been disassembled and tampered with by the customer, which it has been, and it's about to be. You're going to break through this sticker and you're going to get access to that T8 screw. It's all right, Microsoft wasn't going to validate the warranty for this controller anyway, we know that. I recommend unhinging the controller from the rear shell, starting at the bottom by getting a thumb underneath where the rumble force motors are and prying up. Now, the rumble force motors most likely will go a flip-flopping, so try to keep them in these plastic trays because if they go hanging, these could rip off. And granted, it is very simple to resolder them back on, unless you want to remove the rumbles of your controller to increase the battery life and reduce the weight of the controller, but obviously you won't have vibration. Now we're going to separate the mother and daughter board, starting with these 2 T6 screws at the bottom by the rumble force motors. Now, something to note, at this point in the teardown, your controller will not have battery power whatsoever because these 3 contact patches here and here make contact with these 3 and these 3. This is the internal battery, which by the way gets really good battery life, over 40 hours of active time and hundreds of hours of standby in my testing. And while we have the rear shell, I'll explain a couple more things. These are the PCBs or printed circuit boards for the rear paddle actuators, which are these 2 pads. And in case you've ever wondered how trigger stops or locks work, the Elite does have those 3-way trigger stops, and as I adjust the lever, you can see a little plastic peg or lever stop the trigger from being pulled down all the way. And that is how trigger stops or locks work. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this chin or center section, which just pops up with plastic clips. Be careful because this does have your share button as well as the USB-C port. If you're curious how the bumpers work, there's a plastic prong or peg that presses a little button or switch right here, and that is what actuates the bumpers. There are 2 T6 screws in each trigger, and that holds this tiny rumble force vibration motor in each trigger. So if you want to remove these for weight reduction because you don't use them, you can do that. Once you've removed the 2 T6 screws from each trigger, they are on a little plastic clip. Carefully wiggle them off. Sick. You have the mini vibration motor. Now we're going to go ahead and remove this D-pad wheel, get a little fingernail up underneath here, and it just pops right off. Well, usually first time. Come on now. You're making me look silly. There we go. Now, unlike any of the other thumbstick modules for Xbox controllers, these ones are actually threaded on because they have the adjustable tension. At this point in the teardown, remove the magnetic bases for the thumbsticks. The easiest way to do this, as they are threaded, take the longest included thumbstick. If you got the Series 2, if you got the Core, well, take what you got, snap that on, and then you are simply going to loosen them lefty-loosey and then clockward or righty-tighty to get them back on. Then you've got these 2 metal guide pegs, which are just a pain in the butt and make disassembly even harder. You need to lift it off the left side first and then rotate the board to get her up and out. Remove this little black sticker and you can pull off these 2 black wires from the motherboard. And when we go to reassemble, these just pop or press back on these little pads and then return the sticker to its factory position. Now at this point, if it hasn't already, your 3.5mm headphone jack module will pop out. Now when we go to reassemble this controller, you'll make sure that the metal prongs or pegs are facing upward and it just drops in on a little clip like that. And then the mother and daughter board sandwiched together, you have the male ends of the pins right here, female ends of your pins right here, and you basically sandwich it back together, lining up those metal prongs along the way. If you accidentally remove either of the cables from the mother to daughter board, you can see the contact points in this picture and resolder them. To make it easier to work, I removed the 2 rumble force motors in the bottom and I will be resoldering them at the end. You do have another 1, 2, 3, 4 T6 screws. Keeping all of our T6 screws separate from our T8 screws. In case you've ever been curious about how a D-pad or face buttons work, there is a rubber membrane plunger mechanism, which goes over the PCB or printed circuit board like this. And then all of your face buttons, which I really don't want to take out all of them, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to get them back in. You cannot put the wrong face button in the wrong slot because they have these little plastic prongs or cutouts, which not only make you put the right letter in the right slot, but also the right direction. So you can't have B upside down or anything like like that. Something to note, B is also a longer button than the other 3 buttons because it sticks out further. Same exact process getting the faceplate off the core. It is a real pain in the ass. I used 2 of these plastic pry tools plus my hand. I had a little whoops-a-daisy. These plastic tools are rather sharp, so be careful and cognizant of that. And if you don't have a heat gun, which I use, this is going to be very difficult. I would recommend a hairdryer because that adhesive in there is no joke. Again, starting from the bottom where the rumble force motors are, we're going to go ahead and pry up. Okay, it really does help if you get all 6 of the screws. That could have been bad. I'm over here jerking it using damn near all my strength and there's still a screw holding it in place. Rookie mistake. Also something to note, there are magnets inside of the triggers that will basically snag up all of your loose screws, so you might need to pull them back to you. You have 2 plastic prongs or pegs right here. You can use your fingernail or this tool to pry up on them like that. Remove the center section, moving that plunger up and out of the way. If you wanted to change out your face buttons for different colors, you could do that now. Or more commonly and realistically, maybe one of these is stuck in because, well, it's an Elite controller, which shares 90% of the parts with a stock $45 Xbox One or Series controller, which is insane. But yeah, if you want to change out your face buttons, you can do it like that. Your translucent Xbox button goes in the center, of course. The last thing I want to compare is going to be the battery units. You do have 4 T6 screws there, 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 and there. Here's your battery pack. Something to note, it does say Xbox One polymer rechargeable battery on there. You do have your positive and negative terminals on the side. To reinstall the battery connectors, they slide in this little slot like this. And then your battery drops in like this, making contact with those terminals. And these 2 T6 screws will hold in this plastic piece with these 3 brass prongs or pegs, and that is for your charger dock for the carrying case. To reinstall, also quite simple, just slides in and lines up with these 2 T6 screws right there. That does appear to be the identical battery with the exact milliamp hours. And for those of you that have been asking for rechargeable batteries built into Xbox One controllers, if they were to ever do that, these are the battery packs that would be in those units. You have your daughter boards, which are identical. The battery covers or shrouds are identical, and they are covering 2 identical batteries, which are both, curiously enough, labeled Xbox One lithium polymer rechargeable battery. And if you're wondering what they're rated at, it's 3.8 volt, 2050 milliamp hours. These are the PCBs for the rear paddles of the core. These are the PCBs for the rear paddles of the traditional OG Series 2. Are you blurry? Can you autofocus, please? This is a teardown. They need to see what they're looking at. I do believe the rubberized grips are identical. However, these are dirtier, about 9 months old, much more broken in. The anti-friction rings are matte white on the core versus a gloss black on the Elite 2. Plastics do feel extremely cheap on the core, yet they are a rubberized soft touch material on the Elite 2. Same thing with the plastics of the rear shell. 3.5mm headphone jack and accessory port are identical. Here's the 3.5mm headphone jacks. Magnetic D-pad as well as these retention rings are identical. I just realized my microphone was on the wrong equalizer mode, so I apologize for that if it sounded weird. The triggers as well as the chin or centerpiece for the bumpers is identical. The vibration motors for the triggers are identical. The face or action buttons are identical. The motherboards are absolutely identical. Here is the core. Here is the OG Series 2. If I can lay that a little bit flatter for you, there we go. The plastic mechanisms for the 3-way trigger stops are identical. Now, a major topic of discussion is going to be the thumbstick modules, and guess what? Unfortunately, they are identical. They are threaded. Go ahead and autofocus for me, sweetheart. Or don't, that's cool. They are threaded, which is the only thumbstick modules I've ever seen that are. The purpose for that being, they do have adjustable thumbstick tension, which you can see the module for that over here on this side. That is incredibly interesting. When you click down R3 or L3, meaning you click down on the analog sticks, you have a separate actuator pad or button. Only thumbstick modules I've ever seen that on. Generally, this module off the side is not there. So this is the Core 2, and this is the OG Elite 2. Same exact mechanism. Last but not least, the hardware is identical with the same quantity of T6 and T8 screws. Now that we know what these 2 controllers are identical, we're going to go ahead and reassemble them, starting with the Core controller. In case you're wondering what these translucent little pieces of plastic are for, they actually slide over the buttons or actuators for the bumpers. To be 110% honest, I don't know if this is supposed to protect the switch or stabilize the bumper sure or what, but I have left these out several times and it hasn't caused any issues. So if you lose, damage, or just forget about these, I don't think it's gonna ruin your controller. Let's go ahead and drop all these buttons back in here. Get that rubber plunger in there. Go ahead and drop in the daughter board, lining it up with the cutouts for the accessory port in the bottom of the controller. Now, what I advise before you tighten down the T6 screws for the daughter board is pressing the face buttons to test them and make sure that they are actuating and they're not jammed in or stuck or anything like that. Now, keep in mind, B is still going to be very loose because it actually connects to the motherboard, not the daughter board. So we're at the step where we are screwing in the T6 screws into the daughter board or motherboard, whichever one it is. I get these two mixed up. They're part of the same family. They live in the same house. That's all I know. And you don't want to tighten these screws astronomically tight. After all, it is on a printed circuit board. So just make sure they are snug, but you don't need to jack them down as hard as you can to show what a strong boy you are. Again, I recommend at this point of the reassembly testing all of the face or action buttons. Get the little rumble motors back in the triggers. Yes, sir. Motor go burr. Make sure you got the right trigger housing. It is labeled LT for left trigger, RT for right trigger, which is also coordinated with the bumpers. And you're going to line up the side with the plastic peg or prong first. It will drop into place on the opposite side, in which case you are going to use a T6 screw. And this can be a little tricky because the triggers are magnetized, so it might snag your T6 screw away from you when you're trying to put it in place. Oh, like that. She's greedy. She'll snag it from you. Again, magnetized tools for the win. This little block will be linked in the description below. It does make this entire process substantially easier. Now, this is incredibly difficult because clearance is pretty much abysmal. What you could do is remove the rumble force motor like that. That does substantially help, but it's still pretty tight and you're still rubbing up against the shell here. Same thing on the other side. Pop the rumble force motors back in their respective sockets. Sandwich the boards back into place. And of course you have to line those two metal prongs or pegs because Microsoft likes to make it a little bit more difficult. Perfect. Snaps in like that. Slide in these paper doodads for the bumpers. Sick. The D-pad can only drop in one way, and that is like this. Take the metal retention clip and snap it into place. Screw in the threaded thumbsticks, which can be kind of a B word, and you do not want to thread these in the wrong way. So if you feel any extra resistance, make sure you loosen them up. Start again. Go ahead and snap on the centerpiece for the bumpers. Make sure you did not forget the share button. The easiest way I found to do this is to line up the USB-C port and start with one side and then just press it evenly across until both of these plastic pegs slide through the hole. Test both your bumpers to make sure they are actuating correctly. Another quick note, when you're reassembling your controller, you might think, oh gosh, I didn't do the bumpers correctly. They're not pressing in. And that's because the triggers are actually going to press up against them, making them feel as if they're jammed in. But once you drop the controller into the rear shell, it will hold the trigger down just slightly enough to where the bumpers can be pressed successfully. So to test this out, hold your trigger down and then press the bumper. If it clicks down, you'll be totally fine because the triggers will be held down by the rear shell. And test your share button to make sure it is clicking and that your USB-C port is not obstructed. Let's go ahead and return this plastic cover to the battery. Make sure you do still have the pins to power the controller, as well as the pins to be able to charge the battery via that charging dock. The same T6 screws that were taken out will be returned. Now be very careful because these are very strong magnets and they will try and snag your T6 screw away from you with relentless force. As with the T6 screws earlier, you want these snug but not over tightened. Need to go ahead and plug the daughter board and motherboard, which is revealed by pulling back this black sticker. Hello, my darling, my dear. There it is. Sorry, I know I'm obstructing your view. I'll get out of your face in just a second. You feel and hear a pretty distinct snap letting you know that you did get it into place. Go ahead and drop it into the rear shell, but be careful because these rumble force motors aren't really held in by anything and will hang and dangle by those cords, and you don't want to rip them out unless you want to remove the rumble motors. Now we're going to secure the frame to the back shell using the 6 included T8 screws. These extra T6s over here are for the other Elite controller, so don't be concerned about these. Go ahead and line up all these plastic clips that hopefully you didn't break, and let this strong ass adhesive do the rest of the work and snap this faceplate back on there, and hopefully you didn't gouge the living hell out of your rubberized grips. Give her a nice firm press. Yes, the sweet sound of your controller breaking. Heck yes. Yes. Sweet. Press all along the seams to make sure there's no excess panel gaps. Bam. Over at the PC with two fully assembled Elite Series 2 controllers, this one plugged in and we're about to run some diagnostics to make sure everything is a-okay. There's a variety of apps, programs, and even websites to run diagnostics on controllers, but for the sake of this video, we're going to be using the Microsoft Xbox Accessories application, which is pre-installed on the Xbox One and Series consoles, and can be installed on Windows 10 or 11 PCs via the Microsoft Store. Don't mind the shit reviews, we're only using it as a quick and easy diagnostic tool. So this process will be identical whether you're on an Xbox One or Series console, console or you're on a PC. You're going to come over here to this little test beaker, this little laboratory glass, if you will, and this is going to allow you to run some diagnostics. Left analog stick, right analog stick. Clicking down L3 and R3, D-pad, the accessory buttons, the face buttons, A, B, X, Y, bumpers, triggers, and we've got our OG Series 2 plugged in as well, which apparently I named Icarus at one point, I guess. Sure. Yeah, she's good to go as well. Kevin, did you mess up them trigger stops or trigger locks? Not at all. They work great. Let me show you. Fully engaged. 50% mark, and the full squeeze. That's on this bad boy as well. We did it. Teamwork makes the dream work, I've always said. So what we discovered here today is that the Microsoft Elite Wireless Core Controller that just launched 4 days ago, well, depending on when this video is uploaded, 4 days ago, has the identical internal components as the Elite Series 2, which launched in November of 2019, and has been riddled with quality control complaints. Microsoft did address this concern in a blog post, saying that they buttoned down on quality control and more or less hinted around that better parts or components are being used in the assembly of the controllers. There was no visible, tangible proof of that. All of the components looked virtually identical, but now we know for sure, and if you're having any issues with your Elite Series 2 or Core controller, you have a disassembly video to follow along with to fix any of the common issues that the Elite controllers are plagued with, and unfortunately will continue to be plagued with as the internals are virtually identical. So what is next for Ebony and Ivory over here, the dynamic duo, the tyrannical twin set, if you will? Not much is going on for the OG Series 2. This is going to continue to be one of my daily drivers for Xbox and one of my top threes when it comes to Xbox wireless controllers. Now the Core is going to be getting a facelift, a couple of cosmetic modifications in the very near future, a lot of these bolt-ons that don't even require disassembly of the controller. But honestly, this is not the last you're hearing or seeing of the Elite brothers or sisters, and you'll be seeing a lot more of these two controllers on the channel. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. Check out Into the AM for some of the sickest looking and most comfortable cloth to ever grace my gaming giblets. If you don't want to be scorching your corneas with harmful blue light, check out Gamer Advantage, the only blue light glasses on the market that look sexy and actually work. If you're looking for a custom controller that'll blow the competition's tits back, AIM definitively has the best bang for buck or price to performance when it comes to Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch controllers. Nope, they don't do Switch, but they do gaming mice. I said doo-doo. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. If you need a quick laugh or blast of gamer adrenaline, check my short form videos out at TikTok. To get in touch with myself and the stallions and stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.